Thank you for joining me for another session of the Founders Table. This episode is a very dear one to me because it's about a place I've spent a lot of time in and I have a real affection for, Kurdistan in northern Iraq. This tri-border area, which includes Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran on a fourth side, has seen a lot of conflict due to interference from colonial actors which divided this territory into arbitrary pieces. This area has a deep historical and religious significance, and local conflict has evolved into genocides and terrorism, which remain a constant source of underlying tension. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing Jano Rosebiani, the award-winning Kurdish filmmaker who's from this area. Jano has worked in the film industry for roughly 30 years and has produced over a dozen films, many of which have been awarded and lauded for their substance. He's giving us a first look and insight into his current film, which is under development. The work is based on the devastating impact of ISIS on the Yazidi women of this northern Iraqi community. Daughters of the Peacock Angel. All right, welcome, Jano. Thank you so much for making time to join us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm very happy to be here.
And where are you exactly?
I am in Erbil. Erbil is a regional capital of Kurdistan, and Kurdistan is the autonomous Kurdish
Right.
region within Iraq.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as you
So
know, I've spent a good deal of time there. It's a very beloved place to me. As you know, I have people there who I consider like family.
wonderful. And this is where we met.
Yes, exactly. We
Mhm.
did. Very fortunate for us. But tell us a little bit, where you're at, what's happening in Erbil these days. It's quiet.
Stephanie, pretty much the same thing that's happening everywhere around the world.
Mm,
Everybody's
mm,
cautious, worried, self quarantining, just like we're doing it now because of the epidemic with the COVID. And so basically, what's happened, we haven't been hit as much as many other places, especially our neighboring countries and some of the countries in Europe and the United
right.
States. So, but nonetheless, the threat is there.
Yeah,
So we're just being cautious. For me personally, it's giving me a chance to actually focus on my writing. So I'm sitting
exactly.
in the house and writing and writing
Yeah.
and writing. Basically, I'm writing the episodes for the show.
Right. Exactly. That's so great. And I know you're from Sacco, but you're not living near there anymore, right?
Zakos is a small town on the border with
Mm,
Turkey.
mm,
And yes, that's where I'm from. No, actually, good 3 hours drive from
mm,
it. Yeah,
right.
we're in a small country, so 3 hours to get
Mm,
to about anywhere you like.
mhm. It's sort of past the hook, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm, right, yeah.
It's past this. Yeah, exactly. It belongs to the Duhok province.
Yeah, and that's actually where I mean, I think going out that way is where some of the Yazidi camps start to be, isn't it?
There are Yazidi camps.
Sharia and then going to Shingal, that area? Is it right?
Exactly. Sharia is one of them.
Mm.
There are Yazidi camps all over, even here in Erbil and other
Mhm.
places. There
Mhm.
are, I think, somewhere between 3 and 5 Yazidi IDP camps. And then there are other camps for, like other people's refugees from Syria, refugees, internally displaced people from other parts of Iraq.
Mm.
There are camps all over, but the Yazidi ones
That is
are
absolutely
in
true.
Zako and Duhok, even here, about an hour's drive from here. They're all over.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I've been to several of those and Definitely have been, when I go over there, that's, I spend all of my time with people who are living in camps and in those type of situations. But why don't you tell us what happened? What is the situation up there that has caused all these camps and with the Yazidis? Or let's hear it from you. What is it that you know has taken place up in that region?
Sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, for those who haven't been following the news, I mean, Daesh
Yeah.
or ISIS,
Right.
the so-called Islamic State
Right.
jihadists, started off. They came into Iraq in
Mm.
2014. They started off in Syria, and they kind of took over a good portion of Syria. Then they came into Iraq with the intention to come to the city of Mosul, which is also called Nineveh
Right.
province, to make that sort of like their second capital or base.
Right.
And this whole thing with the jihad is they wanted to take over the world basically, and they wanted to start with Syria and Iraq. And and it was sort of, there was a friction. I mean, one of the reasons with them is that their arch enemy was to be the Shia Muslims, and they're the Sunnis.
Right.
Basically, that's how the perception there. But they ended up coming northbound, attacking the Kurds instead after they took over Mosul. And then the ones that became the biggest sort of victims or were hurt the most were actually the Kurdish communities, the Yazidi
Mm.
Kurds, and the
Mm.
Christian communities, the
Mm.
Assyrians and the Chaldean Christians and the
Mm.
Armenian Christians, because immediately these people were put in the category of infidels.
Right.
And so they were hit the most, and specifically the Yazidis and the Shingal area. You mentioned Shingal. And
Mhm.
so the ones that were safe, the ones that were able to escape to Mount Shingal, which is in the Shingal province, uh, tried to make it to safety. About 8,000 of them were able to, and thousands others were not, were caught, were not, lucky enough to make it. And so those people were mostly massacred en masse. The men
Yeah.
were killed, and the women were taken as war spoils,
Right.
as war booties,
Right.
and as well as the children. And so that's where all this tragedy
Mm.
started, because
Yeah.
women were turned into sexual slaves, and they
Right.
were marketed, actually taken to auctions where they were actually price tags were put on them, and they were sold and resold for profit. And the children at the same time were taken to these special schools to kind of indoctrinate them
Right. Like
into becoming
re-education schools. Yeah.
future ISIS.
Right.
And these children could have been, were anywhere from a toddler age to teenagers,
Mm. Mm.
and many of them, eventually were uh, turned into suicide bombers or killers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm.
Yeah, so that's how it started, and then the Yazidis had escaped to Mount Shingal, as well as all the other, people that escaped the Nineveh province. They only had one place to go, and that was Kurdistan region, because
Mm.
even the Iraq side, the Arab Iraq, would not accept them, even
Mm.
like the Arabs. So they all
Mm.
came to Kurdistan, and suddenly, a region of 5 million suddenly had 2 million refugees, which they
Right.
still do.
Right.
Uh,
Yes. There's been no change.
no change, and so the camps are all over. Some of them
Mhm.
were able to make it to Europe, and especially the Yazidi girls. I know the doctor, the psychotherapist who I'm working with, who would be part of our show, or
Mm.
an actor would be playing that part, was able to
Mm.
take many of these girls to Germany for further treatment.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the lucky ones went to, different to Canada and Germany for treatment, but
Mm.
thousands of them are still in the camps,
Right.
and that's where we have
We still don't know where a sizable population of these women and girls are, do we?
According to UNHCR reports, still out of 6,000 plus, still about closely 3,000, maybe a little bit less
Mm.
than 3,000 are
Mm.
still missing.
Missing. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them, of
Yeah.
course, are being killed. Some of them have been killed by ISIS, and some of them have even recently been found in these refugee camps that are holding ISIS
Mm,
families in Syria.
right,
You
yeah,
know,
because they just brought them with them
yeah, yeah. So
wherever
every
they
now and
went,
then,
yeah,
one of them
like
is able
slaves,
to escape, and so
right.
basically, the ones that were rescued were actually brought back. You know, the Kurdistan government did a good job by finding the only way is to really send people out there and get these women and these children to buy them back and rescue them, bring them
Mm,
back. Of course,
mm,
many also were rescued through actual attacks, to the ISIS cells, to the villages they were staying,
mm,
killing them and getting the hostages out, rescuing the
right,
hostages. So there were
mm.
many different ways of rescuing the hostages. About, I would say, a little over 3,000 have been rescued since 2014.
One of the things that I think Americans don't understand is, there is literally no way to explain the level and the magnitude of the effect this type of trauma has on not just a region, but the communities and, the individuals, because when I've spent time up there, what I want people to understand is that this affects everybody. I didn't meet anyone that hadn't been affected by this. Everyone that I've met there has known someone who had been killed or disappeared, taken away. I mean, the northern Iraq has been ravaged by conflict for decades, and I think this is something that is becoming normalized up there to, I think, to the point where people don't really even pay attention to it anymore. Like people in the West, I think that they're not really paying attention to this issue, but this is an everyday, still ongoing issue. And as you said, it's something that I care about a lot is that, these people are all still living in camps and there's really no plan for them, so thank God for the ones that were able to be rescued and brought back, but it's like, okay, what now? What do we do now? What's going to happen for them now? So
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, why don't you tell us about, so what started your feeling of needing to do a film about this?
Well, basically, it's just what you just said. Many of these people, the majority of the women that were victims of sexual slavery are living in a very traumatic conditions,
Mm,
and they also feeling that they've been forgotten already.
right,
No
absolutely.
one is doing anything about them. I mean, what I mean, very little has been done. And
Hmm.
about the attention span nowadays in general, and suddenly something else happens somewhere else, and
Right.
they're totally forgotten, and that's kind of happening already.
Hmm.
So basically, that is one of the main reasons to make this
Mm,
TV series
mm,
is a
mm,
to show a life of a group who are on the edge of extinction. It's one of
mm,
the oldest groups
mm,
and oldest faiths that goes back to the time of the Mitraic ideology, where they worship the sun,
mm,
and thousands of years, and now they've been dwindled, and they've been seeing genocide after genocide.
right.
And so basically, yes, not much has been done. Not much has been done to rebuild their villages and their towns, their homes that are
Yes,
destroyed, so
right.
they cannot go back
They can't go back,
to
right.
them. And I feel like the best way to reach out to all corners of the world to really deliver your message and this vital information is through film. It doesn't happen through
Mm,
politicians, because politicians talk to politicians only.
right. Hmm.
And the
100%.
world community needs to know this, and
Mm,
more needs to be done on all levels, but especially on the level of the world leaders. They really can do much more to
mm.
save these people,
Oh,
to go after
absolutely.
these people, and to help these people get back into normal life, and also to
Right.
guarantee their safety. We're
Mm,
hoping this film will instigate that, will instigate discussions,
mm,
a
mm,
lot of discussions, and end up,
mm.
you know, end of the day, get some good results. Maybe something will be done about these, uh, you know, this group of people who are still suffering a lot.
I agree with you so much, because, the genocide is a problem globally. This is not just an ISIS thing, This has been a problem globally for, 100 years in our even in modern history, right? So if you look all over Africa, all over the Middle East, these things have been going on. It's one group, or it's an ethnic group, or it's a government initiated situation. They can start in a flash. They can start because it's perpetuated by competing interests. I mean, it's shocking when you look into it to realize that this is an ongoing problem. This isn't something that just happens in the Middle East. It's something that I also feel people need to be much more aware of and care about, because I think there's probably several million to almost like a billion people that are just shoved away in camps because these are ongoing conflicts that are still today an issue. Um, and I know that, when I've visited some of these locations, I've seen some of these documents, and when they've highlighted with photos or poetry or film, the actual people involved, the girls, the children. Like, I don't know if you've been to Africa, but I went to Rwanda, and if you go to the Genocide Museum there, it's amazing because they have photos of all the kids and poetry and writing from the actual victims, and you hear how these kids were, one of them that stays with me to this day is, this child who his friends was, assaulted, and he watched him, drag himself through the street to try to get away. And it's, children shouldn't be seeing this stuff, but this is a global issue. And so I think, I agree 100% that seeing it and seeing the women. I mean, I know that I think, your wife is an amazing photojournalist, and she's the one who took those photos that are in our promo, isn't it?
Yes, yes, she did, and she has really an amazing story on uh,
Mm,
how she was able to convince these girls who have been abused and tortured and raped, gang raped and sold and resold, with
mm,
all these terrible things happen, horrible things happening to them, to have them come and dress in wedding gowns
mm,
and pose for her camera and talk
mm.
to her camera. It was no easy thing to do, but the
Yeah.
fact that she is from here and she's been part of this
Mm,
community, she eventually managed to convince some of the girls, not all of them, to do this. And
mm,
the wedding dress, the bridal gown that they wear, really signifies purity despite all of
mm. Yeah, it's amazing.
it.
Mm.
And yes, these people, and especially the children, have seen all these horrible things happening before their eyes, just like the ones you mentioned in Rwanda and other places in Africa and other parts of the world. This will stay with them all their life.
Oh yeah,
It's,
forget it.
it's
Yeah.
not something that can just easily be erased.
No.
But what to do about them, what to do for them, how to help them, and
Right.
I mean that's a big question.
It is the big
And
question.
yeah, and then you mentioned art, music, and drawings and other things. Art is the best treatment.
Mm.
Is
Mhm.
one type of meditation that can take their mind away from their horrible condition into sort of a sphere of creativity,
Mm.
and it's a good
Mm.
escape as well.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah, and a lot of that is already happening in these camps, and I know people even come from different parts of the world to give special, for instance, to give yoga classes, meditation
Mm.
classes, a lot of
Mm.
arts and crafts classes. Even Sivan, my wife, was given photography classes to these girls,
Yeah,
and they loved
right.
it. And I saw them with my eyes how they were,
Yes.
taken to it. So all of this is important, and I want to show this aspect in
Mm.
the drama as well in the series. I want to show
Humanize
a lot.
it.
humanize it and also show a culture that's so unique, that's very
Mm,
rich. And just like,
mm,
the cultures in Africa, I mean, these people have folk songs that date back thousands of years, and each song with a story behind it,
mm,
sort of like mythologies and some real
mm,
stories. I want to show
mm,
all of this. I want to, as you
mm.
said, I want to put a face on this tragedy.
Yeah. And so do you have 2 forms of this coming? Is there like a documentary and a show, or what's your focus?
Well, this started off with wanting to do a docudrama,
Right, okay.
and the drama part was that some events to be reenacted, not the torture and the rape events, but rather events, historical events.
Mm.
To start off going into their history from 5,000 years ago, let's say, from during the
Oh,
Mithraic times, and all
woo.
the way down to today.
That
And
sounds very ambitious.
yeah, that is very ambitious. And then talk to a lot of them, academics, experts, historians,
Wow.
anthropologists, you name it.
Wow.
And but then then kept this idea kept sort of evolving, and then I
Mm.
decided to just simply turned it into a feature film, a dramatic feature
Okay.
film. And my previous films have been like that. My
Mhm.
first Kurdish film after I left LA, came here, was about the chemical bombardment of the town of Halabja.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it wasn't a documentary. It's a drama based on
Yeah.
real background, not
Right.
necessarily real events, created events, but with a real background. So that was the idea. But then a good friend of mine in LA, who's in the business, and suggested, why not? There's so many stories to tell. Why not turn
Mm.
it into a TV series? And Netflix would
Mm.
be perfect home for it.
Right.
So
Yes.
I thought about it. I said, yeah, that's true. How much
Yeah.
can I tell in a feature film? So
Mm.
that's where the idea of a TV series come. But still, I'm open to all versions. I mean, if tomorrow
Mm.
someone says, "Okay, I will support the docudrama or the feature film," I'm ready. I'm all ready to go.
Mm. There's so much
It's
material. So much
exactly, but
material.
exactly.
Yeah.
I said, but at the moment, the series is what I'm focusing on. The
Mm.
Yeah, the serial.
There's definitely a lot of interest. I know just the promo that, we sent out letting people know about the interview coming up, there was such positive feedback. People are interested in this. And I think, part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing with my company and the community is to try to get these stories out from where they're buried. Things are really chaotic in the States at the moment, even globally it's chaotic, but even in the States it's been very chaotic. And so I know even like the news feed is just filled with insane stuff, and I'm just trying to back away from that a bit and reach out to, there's so many, for me this is traumatic stuff, but it's also so positive. It's a positive story that, for these women to be getting the support they're getting, to have someone like you who's dedicating his life, his craft, to a greater cause and a better, like, that's a positive story. That's something that we can feel good about, and it's so important to know about it. How do you think that LA receives these types of docu series? Is there interest in it, or they just want the kind of superficial content?
To be honest with you, LA is a tough cookie to crack,
Mm,
mainly because LA, uh, when we say LA, we mean Hollywood, is a
right.
factory for entertainment. And apparently, they make mainstream movies. I mean, they have their reason. They spend so much money, millions and millions, on movies, and they want to make profit for their investors. They have the right to do what they're doing. That's their businesses. Hollywood, you have Bollywood, you have others. But our kind of film, it's more, I would say, it's closer to the European sensibility, the European state of mind where they make, substance oriented or art house
Mm,
films,
good. Yeah.
and films that deal with issues of the day. Not that
Mm,
Hollywood hasn't done it, but this seems to be more aligned with the European state of mind. It's
sure.
what I'm thinking, but I'm sure there are people in LA. We just have to find the right people who would
Mm,
eat this up. For one thing, I know for sure Angelina Jolie is one
Mm,
person, and there are a handful of other
mm.
celebrities who
Yeah,
are
she's amazing. Yeah.
very strong on these human rights issues. In fact,
Yeah,
just
that's right.
2 days ago, Angelina Jolie made a big speech
Right.
to the UN about
Mhm.
our subject, about the Yazidi women and the children
Mm. Mm.
victims.
Mm.
And so, we want to bring people like her
Right.
into the fold. We want her endorsement. We want her to have a cameo on the show.
Mm. Mm.
We want her
Mm.
name to be on it, and I know she will
Mm.
embrace this because what we're doing is exactly what she's asking
Right.
for, what she's
Yeah.
telling the UN, that we human beings, we the humanity, are guilty for not given enough attention and care to all these victims, especially the children and the
Right.
women, who are
Right.
usually the biggest losers, biggest victims in
Always.
any war
Always.
zone,
Always.
war
Yeah.
situations. So we want to bring people like her into the fold, and I'm sure there will be more, you know, celebrities like her or Hollywood personalities per se.
Mm.
But we're also, approaching producers in Europe, all over Europe. And
Right.
of course, anyone welcome from anywhere in the world to come on board of this project, because
Mm.
the more good people we have on board, the more powerful we are, the more powerful would be our
Absolutely.
delivery, our statement, and end of the day, our subjects will benefit more.
Mm. I know this is something that I'm trying to encourage and perpetuate also is this kind of global teamwork. This is what I keep saying to everyone. And I wonder, with the changes that are happening in digital media, do you think that that's more possible now? Because I think there are some new ways that we can go about producing and disseminating these types of seminal works without needing Hollywood's blessing. But what do you think? You were in Hollywood for a long time. Do you
I'm with you 100%. There are many derivatives or many aspects of what is creating this global media now. One of which,
Mm,
the ease at which you can make films now. I mean, anybody, even with their smartphones, with
right.
HD camera lens in it, can make movies. That's one. And two, I personally consider myself an international filmmaker, and
Mm,
and many of my projects, often my projects focus on cross-cultural themes,
yeah.
as well as human rights themes.
Mhm.
And to me, because we are living in a world that has become so small,
Mm,
and especially now with these internet, worldwide web platforms like Netflix has gone international, and Netflix has some 2 billion viewers.
it's
And,
insane.
I don't mean to advertise for Netflix, but there are
No,
other
it's
platforms.
incredible
Yeah,
what they
but that's a fact. That's a fact. That means, you make a little film anywhere in the village here, in the village in Nairobi, in
right,
the village in Colombia,
right.
you can easily display to the whole world.
And
You
that's
know,
something that I think actually I was reading recently that Netflix is maybe becoming afraid because we actually might get to a point where we don't need them anymore. You know what I mean? I think they have the market. I mean, they're the monopoly on the market for sure. And we love it. We all love to come home and sit down. But there's so many platforms now that are allowed, like someone like me, if I got good enough and could start producing stuff that if I have the will and the interest and the motivation, I actually can just produce all of these things without them.
the-
And they're a little nervous that people are gonna start doing that, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Many people have started platforms, various platforms. I mean, you have so
Yeah.
many of them nowadays, and I mean, that's one way. The days of going to cinemas are almost done with.
Do you
Uh,
think so?
with the digital revolution, well,
Really?
for one thing, cinema is a little more expensive. I mean, the price of one ticket you can be paying for a monthly subscription, where you see
Yeah.
many films. That's one. And two, people nowadays can have bigger screens in their homes, where it gives you the feel of
Wow.
cinema going. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
cinema
guess
is still
that's
fun to go
true.
to. Yeah, but a lot of cinema, I started off by running movie theaters back when
Yeah.
my days in Virginia, when I was in college. And I remember there were these
Oh, that far
huge,
back. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, that's where I was. And there were these huge cinemas, like the Uptown Theater in Washington, the DuPont Circle Cinema.
Uh-huh.
These were big sort of repertoire art house cinemas. But eventually, during my time, while I was running, many of these theaters were suddenly chopped to pieces, and like one cinema hall would be turned into like four or five different tiny
Right,
little halls with like
right.
50 seats each. You know, so I mean that's almost like sitting in your living room, basically. So but that was then. That was still the days of the film. But now the days of the digital on the web, the internet. I mean, I was
Mhm.
talking about the 80s. So
So you think that we're moving away from the film houses?
you know, yes and no. Basically, there are other ways of doing it. Now, many of the film houses have turned into sort of like digital cafes. I myself, I opened a cinema cafe here and was became
Yes,
very popular. Where
right.
people would come, just like the idea came to me from the dinner theaters we
Yes,
have in the States. Where you go have your dinner and see a show on the stage at the same time. Why not a dinner cinema? So
right.
that was the whole idea.
Yeah,
And,
and I've been there, I think that's where we first met, actually,
there you
was
go.
there,
There you
and
go.
it was fabulous. It was fantastic. I wouldn't want to replace that with sitting in my living room.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a social issue. You sit with friends and
Yeah,
you have a
it's
drink, you
such
have
a
food.
good
Yeah.
time.
I mean, the
Yeah.
thing is, believe it or not, a place like that does not exist in Hollywood.
Really?
There are no cinema cafes. There are some in Europe, and when I was mentioning it, I was sitting in a Starbucks and talking to some friends a couple of years back when I was back in LA, and my friend just says, tell me, shh, don't talk too loud. People will hear. This is such an amazing idea. They will steal it
Right.
from you. So but now
I think maybe
here I'm
it's
saying it here,
because
the whole world's gonna hear it now. So here I gave it
right.
away. But
Maybe I think in Hollywood you have all the actors and all the producers, and the actors don't love to watch their own movies, and the producers are too busy working. So that's probably why.
well, I don't know, but the thing is, to make it a center where the film lovers and intellectuals go and discuss film. They watch a film and then you discuss it.
Yeah.
Sort of it becomes, a place where people can mingle, a networking place.
Yeah, I
Definitely,
agree.
actors will want to go there and be seen by casting directors, by producers. Directors may be going to hunt, just the same way they do a lot
Yeah.
of these sort of what do you call it? These pitch sessions in
Mm,
various venues in LA and in New York, I believe, as well, where actors give monologues. They each actor
mm,
it's sort of like a stand-up comedian, except they're not doing comedy; they're doing a monologue to show their
mm,
talent.
mm.
And why not? It could be a good place. To hang out and to meet people, and I think that's becoming the new fad, especially in Europe now. That I know there are many cinema cafes in Europe, and I'm sure I know there are a couple in New York as well, but I know there isn't one in LA in the same way we had
Yeah.
ours here.
So ironic. But I think that's gonna change now, right? What do you think is gonna happen because of the COVID shutdowns and everyone's used to staying at home?
Well,
That's affecting the industry in a huge way, isn't it?
that is affecting it, but all this is temporary. I mean, this storm will be over as well, like many other
Mhm.
storms.
Mm,
But yes, I mean, nobody in his or her right mind would want to go sit in a dark room full of people in these,
full of
COVID
strangers,
days. Unless if you have decided wholeheartedly to commit suicide and you
right.
put yourself in front of truck, in front of the train, didn't work. So now you're going to a dark
Right.
theater, sitting with people that are coughing and laughing. I don't know.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
but like, the storm this will go too. This is
But,
I mean,
because we've been hearing about, and we've seen, all the celebrities are online now. I mean, you can't you can't get away from them at some point. I've never seen so much personal information about these celebrities being pushed out, and they're doing it themselves. I think, they're lacking the creative outlet, they're lacking the social interaction and the attention or the PR, of like doing these major films, because I think production has basically stopped in LA, hasn't it?
I think everywhere, pretty
Yeah.
much everywhere. I mean, once again, why do anything that involves crowds, that involves close
Yeah.
proximity to others? It's just like, let's say there's a field and they say this field is full of landmines. I mean, why would you walk into that field? I mean, even if they say, well, there are just a couple
So
landmines, we
rational.
don't know where they are, but why venture walking into it anyway?
Right?
You know what I mean? Yeah, so
Yes,
it's like that.
absolutely.
It's like that, but once again, I know there are million and zillion films out there. A lot of very bad ones, terrible ones, a lot of
Mm,
very good ones as well.
mm,
And more films will always be made, more stories will be told, and a lot more art will be made as part of
right.
our nature as human beings. So, and it's not just films, it's the sports, it's the big concerts,
Yeah.
anything that deals with humans gathering. But I think
You feel
I'm always
positive.
I've seen so many tragedies in my life. Being a Kurd, we've
Absolutely.
always been bombarded. So I
Yeah,
know this will pass too, and then we'll say, okay, what's next?
right. So, what's happening with Kurdish cinema? Tell us a little bit about that. I know that you're one of the more famous filmmakers, producers from that environment, but who or where else is there a Kurdish industry?
Well, there have been a handful of very good Kurdish films in the past,
Mm,
let's say 15 years, 20 years, let's say since 2000 and on. I made my first Kurdish film. Actually, it was the first Kurdish film made here in the region, called Jian, meaning life. It's about Halabja, and it won almost 100 festivals around the world. And there have
mm,
been many other films like
wow.
that, many other very good films that are Kurdish films that have won prestigious awards at A festivals, and but not enough films have been made because the Kurdish region, or the Kurds in general throughout the world, they count about 40 million. I mean, Kurds say 50, others say 40, 35, so somewhere between those two numbers. And the Kurdish region, Kurdistan, ever since end of World War One, had been divided between these
Right.
states that were created. So in many of these states, the Kurds don't have the freedom. For example, they cannot you cannot make a film there in Kurdish language. You cannot show a film. You're not
Mhm.
allowed. In Turkey, we
That's
weren't even
true.
allowed to speak
I
Kurdish for a
think,
long
yeah,
time.
people don't actually know about that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So now we're confined to one section, this section, the autonomous Kurdish region.
Right.
It's about, I would say, they say it's about the size of France,
Mm,
and but we're only about 6 million. So we have the freedom here, and so we're able to make our films, but we don't have the kind of budgets. We don't
mm,
have
mhm,
the kind of support. The government has been very supportive as much as they can. I mean, they've
mm,
been funding these films, but the government itself is having a lot of problems,
right.
with 2 million refugees, with 6 years of war against the terrorism, where the Kurds
Mhm.
are actually in the forefront of defending the war
Yes, you're
against,
100%.
the
Yeah,
jihadists. And they have other issues with the central government regarding the budget. So,
that's for sure.
as, as Kurdish filmmakers, we always have to go elsewhere to find funding, find sponsors, find investors.
Europe,
For
yeah.
instance, yeah, exactly. For
There's
this
a
TV
lot of
series.
Kurds in Germany.
Well, not only Kurds, I mean, for this TV series, I'm right now in the middle of connecting with European producers, some
Right.
American producers, to bring them on board.
Yeah, good,
And
yeah.
once the COVID issue is less ominous, I will be traveling to give in-person
Mm,
presentations to prospective
mm,
investors. And
mm.
so we have to go elsewhere to find support to make our films, and that's why we don't have enough films made.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's all the more amazing that you're managing to spend the time and that you're using what resources you do have to do this, because it's true. The fact that, we in the States, we don't have these levels of conflict and instability, so we can worry about things like that, the entertainment industry and the arts and whatever. Having been, in Erbil and northern Iraq, it's amazing to me how thriving it is com- compared to the level of conflict that is constantly um, I mean, even now, if you go there, yeah, there's still skirmishes at all the border areas because there's still no agreement between, the countries in that tri area up there about how that should be handled. And so there's conflict all the time. So when you're in a situation where there's regional and geographic conflict all of the time, yeah, like the government has to shift their priorities to basic needs and basic functioning. So it's very commendable and applaudable that you're managing to stay so focused on using art and film as a vehicle for, possibly giving some leverage to these issues. Really is quite amazing.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's exactly you said the magic word is to give a face to some of these issues,
Yeah.
and therefore, because we cannot compete with the blockbusters in Hollywood or Bollywood even because of
Mm,
the lack of the budget. So we focus more on substance.
yeah.
I mean, my motto has always been, a good film, and this is what I really try to do, and I think I've succeeded to a good extent. A good film should be able to make you laugh a little, cry a
Mm,
little, and then
mhm,
reflect and want to come back and see it again.
mm,
If the film does
mm,
that to me, that's a good film.
mm,
Our films are often, because of the lack of budgets and we don't make these huge commercial films, usually are the kind of films that kind of cater or festivals cater to, that are fit festivals and win awards. And but I personally, as a filmmaker, speaking for myself, not for the rest of the Kurdish filmmakers, and I'm sure others are trying to, I break that barrier. I want to make it entertainment, to reach out to the mass audiences, at the same
mm,
time have that substance. You know,
mm,
to me, that's how
mm,
every film should be. You know,
mhm,
and
mm.
uh, and
Well, I
then
know we've already got an audience ready to see this film whenever, do you have a projected goal in mind that you wanna try to release some
well,
of the
basically, we want 2021 to be the year
okay,
of
yeah,
this film, and it'll
yeah,
take that long, with the pandemic as well. Right now, everything's on
right,
standstill,
it's so
but
unsure.
we're developing all aspects of it. I'm busy writing the scripts for the episodes and
Mhm,
preparing to get a sizzle made of the
mm,
film.
mm,
And the one thing about having an audience, I'm happy to hear that your fans will become the audience. I believe
absolutely.
our film would have a major appeal worldwide because of a few reasons. One of which is this would be the first story or the first drama or series, whatever you want to call it, that will take place inside a refugee camp, considering at the moment, as we speak, as per UNHCR reports, there
Yeah.
are 79.5 million refugees worldwide, and yet there has never been
Oh,
a
easily.
film, a drama to show a slice of life inside these camps.
Right.
I mean, close to 80 million, that's the size of France population.
Right.
You
This
know,
is what I try to explain to people,
yeah,
and I think, um, it's not something you can really believe unless you see it maybe, because,
exactly.
I remember the first time I saw some of those places, I think actually it was more like Azarqa, they have, Jordan, border of Jordan, Syrian
Mhm.
camp out there. It's astonishing, astonishing. Yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
you go and it just goes on and on and on and on
Thousands and
and
thousands and
on,
thousands,
and
yeah.
it's as far as the eye can see.
Hmm.
And I think the world has become too comfortable with people living like that. They
Yeah,
just think, "Okay, it's someone else's problem," or it's unfortunate they have this fatalist attitude. Well, that's their situation and they're probably used to it. I mean, people rationalize it, you know? And I'm like, it's insane because right now we're spending billions of dollars to make robots and brain technology and like 3D printing food and like insane stuff. But we can't find the money to get a few of these people into normal lifestyles and reintegrate them into, I mean, some of these people had you know, like doctors, teachers, professionals. These are it's people like you and I who suddenly lost everything and
Yeah,
now living in a substance situation where they don't even have a plan for these people. And yeah, I mean, I think with the refugee number, but that's the displaced people. That's there's so many different populations. I think the number is way higher than
definitely. Yeah.
UNHCR can even
Mm.
manage to
Exactly.
account for. Yeah, and they're everywhere. They're all over the world. You know, you go to, you know, Somalia, Uganda, everywhere, everywhere. So it's definitely something that I care a lot about. And I think the more we can let Western people see these things up close and personally might help people shift their focus away from like the news feed this the like I call the toxic news feed. You know, there's really nothing on there. You know, I don't know what people are looking at all day on those things.
Yeah,
um, Look at some real information and connect with some real people, real human beings
exactly.
who
Exactly.
are
Exactly. Yeah.
suffering. I mean, these people are living in a way that none of us would want to live. And so I don't think there's any difference between myself and them. So if I don't want to live like that, then I don't want to also co-sign on somebody else having to live like that. It's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly. And then they only begin to sort of wake up when suddenly these refugees are on their doorsteps. I mean, Europe is having major problems,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's been a few
but
years of
yet,
that. Yeah.
yet the UN still has not been able, or the world community, the world leaders, let's say, to
Mm,
come up with a concept to
right.
solve this problem once and for
Right.
all. For
Right.
instance, maybe I mean, you go just, as you mentioned, the camp in Jordan. I mean, all these other camps, they're like cities, little cities
Yes.
now.
Yes. Yeah.
A camp can be housing as many as 10,000 to 80,000 people. And they're like little, bigger than villages. They're like towns and cities.
Oh yeah,
And,
huge.
and yet, perhaps UN should come up with an idea of buying a piece of real estate somewhere in some secluded part of the world and create a new country and take all the refugees there and give them all the qualities and all the help to
Mm,
turn them into a new country. Just, I mean, that's how
mm.
America was and Australia was formed. People immigrated, maybe find a home from
Very
it. For
true.
anyone who becomes a refugee, here's a
Very
UN
true.
country protected by UN, and all the refugees can go and they build cities and towns. And then anytime the refugee wants to go back to their original home, if the issues in their home is fixed, then they can leave, but otherwise they're citizens of this new country that's formed by UN.
Mm,
Maybe they
yeah.
should be doing that.
Mm,
Anyway, the second reason thing that I'm making this film, besides trying to show life in these camps and hopefully touch some nerves and the human, the conscience of the people in charge or who can do things. The second thing, this is a story of women. As
mm,
I mentioned earlier, any
mm.
conflict anywhere in
Yes,
the world, the biggest
yes.
victims are women and children. And and so this is a story of women who have been turned into sex slaves, who have been
Mhm,
sold and resold and tortured and killed, and their loved ones killed right before their eyes. And this is something will appeal to the women all over the world. And I hope it not only appeals to women, it should appeal to every human being.
right.
And that especially the women should would feel more attached. Therefore, this is a drama, a series that should be made. And when we say appeal, we're not thinking. I'm not talking in business terms. Oh, yeah, it will appeal to such a wide audience. It'll make money. No, what I mean, it will it will be distributed all over the world, and then the after effect is that the world community would eventually do something about it.
Right. I mean, I think that that's what we're on the same page, and we're trying to work together to do that. And part of the reason why I'm trying to work with you and others to do that is because, I think, the camps were the UN's big idea. That was their idea. Was,
Yeah,
okay, we'll put all these people in camps. And it's been several decades of that. And, having been very close to the humanitarian operations, I get I get the satisfaction of at least providing someone housing temporarily because these people are stranded. And so you feel really good if you can at least get them into a camp. But that's not supposed to be the end state. It's supposed to be a temporary place. And you're exactly right. There's not been great dialogue on how to transform their situation. And that actually would be another amazing conversation to have later at a later date, is to really discuss the whole issue of the whole statelessness issue. And, there's so many layers to that for sure. I would so worth getting into, but
yeah.
I hope together that we can humanize this issue, and we look forward to working with you on that for
I
sure.
really appreciate that, Stephanie, and I appreciate you doing this podcast as well and spreading the word. And I'm sure we can, because of what you believe in, what you're made of, and as you said, our visions kind of sort of are parallel. Definitely,
Mm,
we can do more work together on this. And
yes.
the whole thing is, end of the day, the work eventually has to get to the source of the problem, not just temporary medicine by putting
Hmm.
people in these camps or doing this or
Right.
that. Is that, if these countries stop fighting each other and killing, and if the superpowers and the regional powers stop feeding all these smaller countries with guns and weapons because to make
Right.
money off of them and using their proxies,
Right.
if they go to the core of the problem and solve it at that point, then everything else will be resolved. I'm sure all these people would want to go back to their homes and
Yes,
rebuild their houses. But
you
nobody is
are.
ever talking about, solving the issue from the core, from its origin. It's like a disease. You take aspirin to alleviate the pain
Mm.
temporarily, but
Mhm.
you're not going to the root of the of the
Right.
of the issue to solve it once and for
Mm.
good.
Well, here's what I could say to that. I think in a lot of ways, I'm just turning my back on expecting change to happen at the political level. I think their hands are tied. I think they're too deep in terms of, like you're saying, with the proxies. And I mean, the layers to this are things that most people don't understand. We have a much more in-depth understanding of what's constraining this issue. So, I know that we can't perhaps force them to do things that they just won't be able to do quickly or effectively. So I believe that as, civil society, human beings, individual people, artists, entertainers, I think that's where the changes can come. And I think now we're so globally connected, and we have so much more capacity to talk to each other and to do projects and to travel. And so I hope to see the synergies and the movements happen more at a ground level. I think mass participation in these issues, that's what it's going to take, in my opinion. Because
Definitely.
I think there's been I mean, I also, Angelina Jolie and George Clooney and some of these guys who have done like really incredible work, more than most of their peers. But at some point, it's not enough because there has to be mass participation. And I think people just wait and they say, oh, well, the UN's probably working on that, right? Or, oh, well, isn't, you know, World Health or somebody's probably doing something right. And it's like, no, we're going to have to step up and start to care a lot more about this ourselves.
I
I
fully
think
agree.
I think they're all a little bit busy right now.
Mhm.
If you haven't noticed, like the
Yeah,
entire international level and national level, like governance is very chaotic at the moment.
yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
wouldn't wait for them to come up with a
Well,
conclusion
I mean,
anytime soon. So I'm not, I'm not. This is my solution.
Well, they didn't do much when they were not chaotic, when there wasn't Corona. So I don't know. But the thing
Mm,
is,
it's a good
uh,
point. Good point.
everybody should try from their own
Yes.
ability or capacity.
Yes.
And you mentioned Angelina Jolie and George Clooney, and earlier we talked about when I said I consider myself an international filmmaker. I would love to get other filmmakers from
Right.
different parts of the world, from Africa, from
Yes.
Asia, from Australia, from Europe, America, everywhere,
Mm.
to sort of join forces and do things in groups, collaboration. I'm
Yeah, and that's something
welcoming
that
any
we
filmmaker. If anyone is listening
right.
who wants to be a part of this, please drop me a note. Doors wide open. I like to put them on the board of this project and other bigger projects.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all the projects from here, but they could
Mhm.
be in Africa. They could be anywhere in the world, in
Right.
Latin
Exactly.
America.
Yeah.
And I think just like musicians all join hands and that they create "We Are the World." Filmmakers should join hands too.
Right.
They should do collaborations,
Right.
and I
Yes.
hope that will also happen. And everyone from their own sort of capacity
Right.
to wait on the world leaders to do things. Believe you me, they
Yeah.
will not. They will not. Yeah,
Yes.
but that's another
I
subject.
love
That's a subject for another day.
right. Yeah. I mean, this is all amazing stuff and it's really fun and it's exciting and it's also just it's so important. And so we already talked about, for sure that's what 25th community is trying to do is to help assist and bring together those type of collaborations. So that kind of stuff is already in the works and it's really exciting to be able to talk to all of you and help make that kind of stuff happen.
Thank you,
So,
Stephanie.
yeah, I think we're gonna close for today, but I'm definitely gonna have you back so we can keep talking about some of these issues. And as you know, platform is completely open to you if you ever find time if you want to publish anything or put anything out. We just know you're super busy working on this project, but anytime you can give us a call and stream is open for you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, dear. And if you ever come this way, we'd love to see you
Yeah,
again
soon
sometime
again,
in the
I hope.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the challenges of traveling minimize, I plan to get back out and see
Hmm.
everybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Virginia Beach, not far.
I would rather come in
Not
that way. Yeah, Miss Virginia Beach.
yeah,
Perfect.
I know.
Perfect. Okay, dear. Thank you for this interview. I really enjoyed talking to you. And
Okay, Jano. Well, we will be talking to Buddha Blaze next week, who is in Nairobi. And so we have more really interesting and excellent people coming up throughout the next few weeks.